I stared at my resignation letter going viral, 127,000 shares in 6 hours, while watching our hospital's stock price plummet in real time. The Medicare fraud evidence sat uploaded on 3 federal servers, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with reporters' calls. Just 12 hours earlier, I'd been their star physician saving them millions. Now I was about to cost them everything. My name is Dr. Lauren Hayes, and I'm 34 years old. 5 years ago, I thought being an emergency room physician meant saving lives and making a difference. The pandemic taught me something else entirely. It taught me that hospitals see doctors as expensive machinery that occasionally needs oil changes. Standing outside that boardroom at Metropolitan General Hospital, still wearing scrubs that smelled like disinfectant and someone else's blood, I actually felt hopeful. Stupid, right? After 16 hours of keeping people alive, dodging death, and running on 3 hours of sleep, I genuinely believed they'd honor their promise about pandemic bonuses. The waiting felt different that day. My colleagues shuffled around me, nurses who'd worked doubles for months, residents who looked like walking ghosts, techs who'd risked everything without proper protective equipment. We'd all heard the rumors about record profits. The hospital's efficiency system I'd designed had saved them millions while we worked ourselves into the ground. Then Bradley Thornton III walked in, 28 years old, trust fund baby, family connections that landed him the administrator position, despite knowing absolutely nothing about medicine. He wore a suit that probably cost more than most nurses made in a month. The guy had never touched a patient, never worked a night shift, never watched someone die while their family couldn't even say goodbye. His announcement hit like a slap across the face. After careful consideration of our fiscal responsibilities, he said, reading from notes like he was discussing quarterly printer paper orders, the board has decided to postpone all medical staff bonuses indefinitely. The room went dead silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming overhead. I watched faces around me crumble. These were people who'd missed their kids' birthdays, who'd slept in hospital parking lots to avoid bringing COVID home, who'd held dying patients' hands because families couldn't be there. But Thornton wasn't finished. Frankly, doctors and nurses are already overpaid for their education level, he continued, actually smiling. You should consider the privilege of serving as compensation enough. Healthcare is a calling, not a business. The privilege of serving. Let that sink in. This from someone whose biggest medical emergency was probably a paper cut during a board meeting. Meanwhile, his own bonus had increased 40% that year for exceptional crisis management. Apparently, crisis management meant sitting in air-conditioned offices while other people did the actual work. I felt something break inside me that day. Not snap. Breaking implies suddenness. This was more like watching a bridge slowly collapse under too much weight. The weight of hypocrisy, of corporate doublespeak, of watching genuine heroes get treated like disposable equipment. The worst part? Thornton delivered this news with the kind of corporate smugness that suggested he actually believed his own garbage. He talked about shareholder value and operational efficiency, while standing in front of people who'd literally risked their lives to generate those profits. Walking out of that meeting, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. The naive idealism that carried me through medical school was officially dead. In its place grew something harder, angrier, and infinitely more dangerous to people like Thornton. My colleagues dispersed quietly, defeated. They had families to feed, mortgages to pay, student loans that wouldn't disappear just because their employers were soul-sucking parasites. They couldn't afford to fight back. But I kept thinking about that smug smile, those dismissive words, the casual cruelty of people who'd never earned anything in their lives, telling actual heroes they were overpaid. 3 days later, I accidentally received some misfiled billing documents while reviewing patient charts. What I discovered made that boardroom humiliation look like a minor irritation, because apparently, denying hardworking medical staff their earned bonuses was just the appetizer. The real feast of corporate greed was about to reveal itself, and it would make everything else look like child's play. Those misfiled billing documents sat on my desk like a ticking bomb. At first glance, they looked routine: standard Medicare reimbursement forms, treatment codes, physician signatures. Nothing unusual for a busy emergency department. But then I noticed something odd. Dr. Martinez, a second-year resident, had apparently performed a complex cardiac catheterization on Mr. Thompson in room 12. Impressive, right? Except I knew for a fact that Martinez had been in the break room eating a sandwich when that procedure happened. I'd seen him there myself. The actual procedure? Done by Dr. Peterson, our attending cardiologist. But Peterson's name appeared nowhere on the billing forms. My stomach dropped. See, here's how Medicare reimbursement works. When a resident performs a procedure, Medicare pays the hospital about 60% of the full rate. When an attending physician does the same procedure, Medicare pays 100%. The difference can be thousands of dollars per case. This wasn't a clerical error. This was fraud. I spent that night cross-referencing patient files with billing records. What I found made me physically sick. Case after case of residents' work being billed as if attending physicians had done it. The pattern was everywhere once I knew what to look for. Martinez. Performing neurosurgery. A first-year resident apparently doing liver transplants. Even I was supposedly performing procedures I'd never heard of, in departments I'd never worked in. The scheme was brilliant in its simplicity and absolutely disgusting in its execution. Every fraudulent billing meant more money flowing into Metropolitan General's accounts, money that somehow never found its way to actual medical staff salaries or desperately needed equipment upgrades. Money that instead funded executive bonuses and shareholder dividends. Then there's the timeline issue that really got my blood boiling. I traced the billing irregularities back exactly 2 years. Want to guess when they started? The same month Bradley Thornton III got promoted to head of operations. Pure coincidence, I'm sure. Over the next week, I became a detective. Late nights in the hospital, I photographed everything. Billing records, patient charts, treatment logs, staff schedules. I cross-referenced dates, times, and physician assignments. Built spreadsheets that would make forensic accountants weep with joy. The fraud wasn't small-scale either. We're talking about $3.2 million in false billings over 2 years. Money stolen directly from taxpayers, from Medicare, from a system already stretched thin, trying to care for elderly and disabled Americans. But here's what really made me furious: the human cost. While Thornton and his cronies were stealing millions, our emergency department was dangerously understaffed. We had broken equipment that couldn't be replaced because of budget constraints. Nurses were working triple shifts because hiring more staff wasn't cost-effective. I watched colleagues burn out and quit. Saw good doctors make mistakes because they were too exhausted to think straight. Lost patients who might have survived if we'd had adequate staffing and functioning equipment. All while millions of stolen Medicare dollars disappeared into executive pockets. The worst part? Those overworked residents whose names were being forged on billing documents, they had no idea their signatures were being used to commit federal crimes. These kids were drowning in student debt, working 100-hour weeks, and unknowingly becoming accomplices to Medicare fraud. Makes sense that Thornton would target them, right? Residents are too tired and scared to ask questions. They trust the system, assume the paperwork is legitimate, focus on learning medicine instead of scrutinizing administrative processes. Perfect victims for a perfect crime. 2 weeks into my investigation, I had another brutal shift. 18 hours straight. 2 patients lost due to equipment failures and understaffing. I sat in my car afterward, staring at the hospital building, thinking about everything I'd discovered. The denied bonuses suddenly made perfect sense. Why pay medical staff what they're worth when you can steal millions from Medicare instead? Why invest in proper staffing when fraud generates better profit margins? That's when I realized I was at a crossroads. I could report this through internal channels, file a complaint with hospital administration, trust the system to police itself, maybe write a respectful letter to the board expressing my concerns about billing irregularities. But let's be honest about what would happen. The same executives who denied our bonuses while stealing millions would suddenly develop integrity. Thornton would investigate himself and discover wrongdoing. The board would sacrifice their golden goose for the sake of ethics. Right. Internal reporting would accomplish exactly nothing except putting a target on my back. The evidence would disappear, I'd get labeled a troublemaker, and the fraud would continue with better security measures. No, this situation called for nuclear options. The weird part is how calm I felt making that decision. No dramatic moment of revelation, no emotional breakdown. Just cold logical assessment of available options and their likely outcomes. If I was going down this path, I'd go down it properly. Document everything, build an airtight case, then detonate it in the most public way possible. Make the story too big to bury, too detailed to dismiss, too embarrassing for the hospital to survive intact. I spent another week perfecting my documentation, triple-checked every fact, verified every timeline, organized evidence in ways that would make federal prosecutors happy. This wasn't going to be some vague whistleblower complaint full of speculation and hurt feelings. This would be a precision-guided missile aimed directly at the heart of Metropolitan General's corporate structure. During my final shift before pulling the trigger, I lost another patient. Mrs. Rodriguez, 73 years old, grandmother of 6. Heart attack, perfectly treatable if we'd had proper staffing and functioning equipment. Instead, she died while we scrambled with broken defibrillators and waited for specialists who were covering 3 hospitals simultaneously. Her family thanked me for trying, while executives were literally stealing millions that could have saved her life. That night, I sat down at my computer and began writing. Not just a resignation letter, a declaration of war. Every detail, every dollar, every lie, every patient who'd suffered while corporate criminals got rich. I documented the denied bonuses, Thornton's insulting comments, the dangerous understaffing, and most importantly, the systematic Medicare fraud that funded their greed. But I wasn't just resigning. I was about to teach Bradley Thornton III exactly what happens when you mess with someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The next morning, I'd upload this letter to every social media platform I could find, send copies to local news outlets, federal agencies, and anyone else who might care about healthcare corruption. What I didn't expect was just how hungry the art world was for this story. The resignation letter went live at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I posted it simultaneously across LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and sent copies to every local news outlet I could find. Then I hit submit on federal complaints to the Office of Inspector General, FBI Healthcare Fraud Unit, and Centers for Medicare Services. My documentation was bulletproof. 3 years of medical training plus 2 weeks of obsessive investigation had produced a masterpiece of evidence. Billing records, patient charts, staff schedules, financial statements, everything cross-referenced and time-stamped. Federal prosecutors dream about cases this well-documented. The response was immediate and absolutely explosive. Within an hour, my LinkedIn post had 500 shares. By noon, Jockert Metropolitan Fraud was trending on Twitter. Healthcare workers from across the country started commenting with their own horror stories. Nurses in Seattle, doctors in Miami, techs in Denver, everyone had similar experiences with corporate healthcare greed. But the real avalanche started when local news picked it up. Channel 7's morning show led with my story at 8 a.m. Local ER doctor exposes $1 million Medicare fraud. They read portions of my letter on air, highlighting Thornton's privilege of serving comment. Social media exploded. My phone started ringing every 30 seconds with reporters, attorneys, and random people wanting interviews. The hospital's parent company, Consolidated Healthcare Systems, watched their stock price crater in real time. Down 12% by market open, 15% by lunch. Investors were bailing faster than passengers on the Titanic. Let's not forget the patients. Metropolitan General's emergency department, usually packed beyond capacity, looked like a ghost town by afternoon. Patients were transferring to other hospitals. Scheduled surgeries got canceled. Families demanded their medical records transferred elsewhere. Nobody wants treatment at a hospital stealing from Medicare. If they're defrauding the government, what else are they lying about? Then the staff resignations started pouring in. Dr. Martinez submitted his resignation by 10 a.m. 3 nurses quit before lunch. The afternoon shift was so understaffed, they had to divert ambulances to other hospitals. Turns out healthcare workers have limits, and watching their employer exposed as criminal fraudsters crosses those limits pretty decisively. The legal cavalry arrived around 2 p.m. Federal agents with badges and serious expressions showed up for surprise audits. They seized computers, filing cabinets, and billing records. Employees got interviewed one by one. The hospital's legal department looked like they'd been hit by a freight train carrying lawsuits. Bradley Thornton III, placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Amazing how quickly fiscal responsibility becomes potential federal crime when actual adults start paying attention. Class action attorneys started circling like sharks smelling blood. Patients defrauded by billing irregularities. Taxpayers stolen from through Medicare fraud. Healthcare workers denied earned compensation while executives stole millions. The lawsuits would be legendary. My phone kept buzzing with job offers from hospitals across the country. Apparently, exposing Medicare fraud makes you surprisingly employable in healthcare. Who knew integrity was such a marketable skill? The weird part is how vindicated I felt watching everything unfold. 3 months of investigation, 2 years of systematic fraud, countless patients who suffered due to understaffing, and justice was finally happening. Real consequences for real crimes committed by real criminals wearing expensive suits. But the most satisfying moment came around 6 p.m. Local news interviewed Thornton outside the hospital. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, stuttering through corporate non-apologies about reviewing internal processes and taking allegations seriously. The same guy who'd smugly told us we were overpaid now looked like he might cry on camera. Sometimes the good guys actually win. The settlement discussions started within a week. Whistleblower protections meant I'd receive a percentage of any recovered funds. Conservative estimates put my potential payout around $800,000. Not bad compensation for doing the right thing. Metropolitan General's reputation, built over decades, lay in ruins. Federal investigations, criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and complete loss of public trust. Corporate healthcare greed finally met consequences that actually mattered. And that's how one angry doctor with nothing to lose brought down an entire hospital system. The federal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, Bradley Thornton III wasn't just on administrative leave, he was in handcuffs. Turns out the FBI takes Medicare fraud seriously when you hand them a perfect case with bow-tied evidence. The charges were beautiful. Wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, falsifying medical records. Each count carried up to 20 years in federal prison. Thornton's lawyer tried arguing he was just following orders, but it's hard to claim innocence when your signature appears on every fraudulent document. Metropolitan General closed permanently 6 months later. The parent company declared bankruptcy rather than face the tsunami of lawsuits. Consolidated healthcare systems, once worth $2.3 billion, liquidated assets to pay criminal fines and victim compensation. Shareholder value indeed. The ripple effects kept spreading. Other hospitals started getting surprise federal audits. Whistleblowers emerged at facilities nationwide. My resignation letter had become a template for exposing healthcare fraud. Apparently, corruption was everywhere once people knew what to look for. My settlement check arrived on a Tuesday morning, $847,000 from the Whistleblower Reward Program, plus damages for wrongful termination and emotional distress. Not bad for doing the right thing. The job offers never stopped coming. Hospitals wanted to hire the doctor who'd exposed Medicare fraud. Weird how integrity suddenly becomes a selling point when federal agents start knocking on doors. I accepted a position at St. Mary's Community Hospital. Better pay, actual staffing levels, and management that treats doctors like humans instead of profit-generating machinery. The work feels different now, like medicine instead of corporate theater. Sometimes I drive past Metropolitan General's empty building. Weeds growing through the parking lot, windows boarded up, a monument to what happens when greed replaces patient care. The community lost a hospital, but they also lost a criminal enterprise, masquerading as healthcare. 3 years later, Thornton got sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His trust fund couldn't buy him out of Medicare fraud. The judge specifically mentioned my documentation during sentencing, calling it exemplary civic courage in the face of institutional corruption. The privilege of serving indeed. Healthcare workers still contact me about suspicious billing practices at their hospitals. I forward everything to federal authorities. Turns out there's an entire network of doctors, nurses, and administrators who refuse to let corporate criminals destroy American healthcare. We're watching now, we're documenting everything, and we're not afraid to burn down corrupt institutions when necessary. Sometimes the good guys actually win. Sometimes whistleblowers change entire industries. Sometimes one angry doctor with nothing to lose can remind everyone that healthcare is about patients, not profit margins. The system isn't fixed, but it's definitely more careful about who it tries to screw over.